All right, everyone, the red light is on, which means we're recording. So this is Kyle and Mark back again for another week of the Weekly SITREP, where Kyle and I get together and we talk about the big events from the week, mostly in the business and politics world. That way, any of you who are thinking about getting out of the military and trying to figure out, what you're going to do afterwards, if you're prepping for an interview or applying to grad schools or whatever it is, you can feel more comfortable about, when someone uses the term like SPAC, what the hell is that? Don't worry, we're going to talk about it today. You feel more comfortable with that whole process. Okay, so we're going to jump right into it because we got some really good stuff that we want to cover today. So the first part of the show is called the mission briefs. This is where we talk about some military related news. And in some big news this week, troop levels in Iraq and Afghanistan are down to 2,500 each. So that's been a big initiative from Donald Trump to get troop levels down in those two countries. And, I deployed to Iraq. Kyle, I know you went to Afghanistan. If you're listening to the show, you've probably been to one or the other at some point in your military career. And it maybe seems like the sun is finally starting to set on these two wars. Kyle, what are your thoughts on this, man?
I remember. So when did you go to Iraq, Mark?
I was in. It was like I deployed like late 2014, so like early 2015.
Okay. Yeah, so I was in Afghanistan from 2010 to 2011, and that was when the Obama surge was going on, and it was one of the most active times in the entire country, right? And I remember, and I think we had like over like 100,000 troops in the country, right? And then if you add like the contractors and everybody else there, I mean, I don't know what number it would have pushed it to, but there was a lot going on. It's just crazy to think about, right? Like 2,500 troops, it's like nothing. They like we like fully, like especially in RC East, like we fully occupied that area. I mean, to the extent that you could fully occupy anything with 100,000 people. Yeah. You're never more than like, as a pilot, you're never more than like 20 minutes away from a FARP, which is always like really great because you didn't have to worry about fuel as much. But just the idea that you only have like 2,500 people now, it's just, this is a big country. It's really mountainous, right? And I know, there's like other things going on with how they've like trained up the Afghan National Security Forces, and they use SF as a way, as like a force multiplier and everything. But it's just like talk about a token thing. And I just remember sitting on a ramp in Jalalabad, right? I was talking with some other pilots who'd done a couple tours there, and they were like, "There's no way we're never going to leave this country, right? Like, or that we're never going to have like rotations are never going to stop." They were convinced they were going to go into like perpetuity, and it's remarkable to see that essentially, there's it's coming to an end, right? Or as much of an end as it can come to.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the Biden administration is going to do with, in particular, I think like with Afghanistan, given that he was, part of the Obama administration when, they put a big surge in the country and everything. And so I'm like curious if he's going to try and maybe take the same strategy. I haven't seen him talk much about the GWAT in particular, but Iraq and Afghanistan at all.
I think Biden was an advocate for just mostly having special forces troops, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
That was kind of like his always strategy, right? But of course, he wasn't the president at the time. So it'll be interesting, to see what take he goes down on now that he's the one who's got the reins here. So
yeah. I'm just hoping that my kids aren't doing the same patrol routes in Iraq and Afghanistan that we were,
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy, man. If you told World War II veterans, I mean, obviously there's still some around, but be like, yeah, we still have troops over, like, I mean, like back in like 1944, right? Like, hey, like in 2020, there's still going to be U.S. troops in Germany, right? Like they would like what?
What?
Like, I mean, or like to tell somebody in, Korea, right? Hey, in 2020, there's still going to be U.S. troops in Korea, right?
Yeah. Like we're still going to be manning the 38th parallel. Yeah. Yeah. It's wild.
Yeah. Be like, what? Yeah. So definitely, who knows? Maybe 50 years from now, we'll still have troops there. Yeah.
Okay. This next story that we got, I'm actually going to punt this one to you, Kyle, just because I think this is like right up. I know this is right up in your alley of what you're working on. So why don't you tell everyone about this one you wanted to share with the audience?
Yeah, this is a really interesting story, right? And the headline of this story is DoD announces trusted capital digital marketplace, right? And maybe it's like a little backdrop, right? When I left my last firm and went to my new role here, part of my role is working in the defense ecosystem that helps it's helping the military go through its modernization effort, right? And so, the military has stood up all these modernization organizations, like AFWorks, Army Futures Command, Army Applications Lab, SOFWorks, Defense or not Defense Acquisition University, but Defense Innovation University, all these different kind of organizations that are really heavily focused on trying to solve the military's innovation problems, right? And they're trying to do it almost through this method of public venture capital, using what are called small business innovation research contracts, so SIPRs. There's another called STTRs and OTAs, which is other transactional authority. And essentially what the military is trying to do here is do seed investment into promising startups that are not prime contractors. So people other than BAE or Lockheed Martin, or any of these massive, or like Harris, L3, people like that, or organizations like that. And so there's like these different phases, right, of contracts that they can give. And so, part of my role is to kind of help facilitate that. But this trusted capital digital marketplace, it's like trying to establish like a trusted source of funding to like the defense industrial base, right? Which may sound a little oxymoron, right? Like, defense contractors make plenty of money, but you're trying to find a way to get it to people who are not prime contractors. And,
Right.
this is just continuation of that goal. And so like the goal of this is to basically identify secure sources of funding for small and medium sized businesses, and combat threats from adversarial capital, right? And so like the idea is that if you provide a gateway to an investment ecosystem and you can bring more of these startups into the fold, right, there's more opportunity to give them capital that'll give them more runway, right? So they can, either continue to build out solutions, right, and probably eventually get acquired by larger prime contractors, which is kind of similar to what happens in the public market right now. When it comes to tech companies, right? Like most tech companies don't actually scale. Most tech companies sell out, right? They sell out to the large tech companies, right? And this is almost like a way for it to happen. It says, the quote here, trusted capital works by providing opportunities for trusted financial institutions and qualifying companies to explore mutually beneficial partnerships in support of national security goals. So really interesting. It'll be interesting to see how this helps promote the defense ecosystem. And I actually had the opportunity to attend an AMA with a gentleman, Craig Cummings, over at Moonshot Capital. And it was facilitated by Capital Factory in downtown Austin. And this gentleman, he's a West Point graduate, and he left the Army at year 17, right? So 3 years before retirement. And he had a successful exit from a company he founded, and now is a venture capitalist, right? And it's really interesting to listen to him talk about some of the challenges when it comes to dual use technology commercialization with defense and commercial technologies, right? Because venture capitalists want to invest money in this, but it's it's tough, right? Because it's tough to say hey, if you're doing some of this dual use technology development, right, at how do you get the military stuff over into the commercial sector? And the use cases can be a little tighter. So it's just really interesting to hear it. But that's like an event that's open to anybody, right? And I've had people message me on SITREPs, be like, how do I learn more about this, right? You go to Capital Factory, you go sign up for these events, you can hop in and learn on. Our founder actually pointed me in this direction because I'd be like, hey, I want to continue to learn more about this, right? So I would encourage people go to Capital Factory. Austin, Texas is kind of the hub of defense innovation in the country, right? And you can sign up for these events for free and check it out and just kind of start to educate yourself. First step in anything.
Yeah. And I imagine with a lot of these kind of, especially with the tech companies, there's almost a sweet spot where whatever type of tech they're developing, there's this point where, if they reach this point, it's going to become almost impossible for them to then try and convert it into, a strictly defense or security related technology, and they're going to be so commercial, it's going to be hard for them to like pull that back. But if you catch them at this point where it's like early on, still being developed, they can create the separate tracks and like go in both directions.
Well, he said two interesting things that I think that are worth mentioning, right? He brought an example. There's this red leg augmented reality that, fighter pilots would wear, right? And he says like a technology like that has like immediate scalable need in the commercial sector, right? And so it's easy to take that technology and like, okay, like Delta could use this, right? American Airlines could use this, other, aviation carriers could use this. He's like, but if, you provide like, say, like a robotic autoloader and like a Paladin, that might be a tougher commercialization, dual commercialization.
That's a tougher sell. Yeah.
But he also said, he's like, but look, there's also another thing to consider, which is like maybe, if you have a defense startup and it really begins to like crush it, like it's some sort of like huge scalable need within the DoD that can be adopted quickly, you don't need to do another dual use. You don't need to do a dual use commercialization, because what's going to happen is you're just going to get bought by like L3 or, like Lockheed Martin or something, because they're going to see the money, right? They're going to see the value. So, always really interesting to kind of hear that sort of perspective from somebody who strokes checks, on the regular.
Right. Right.
So yeah, but totally, I think people should check that stuff out. It's totally free to check out. And, the biggest thing is this education and perspective. So.
Yeah. Also, I'll add in there, if you're trying to solve a big problem within DoD, if you can figure something out with property and making that experience easier with a technology solution, then everyone would be appreciative. I don't know if DoD is going to buy into it, but it would be greatly appreciated by everyone in the services.
Yeah. Or find out a way to have buildings that are not just named after numbers. You could provide like
some type of like logical building numbering, instead of being like, okay, you got to go to building 2539X.
Yeah, be
which is right next to 438D.
Yeah,
obviously
like, okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah, let me just navigate right to it.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, we're gonna pivot out of this because we could probably start going down a rabbit hole of things that the DoD needs to improve. But before we do that, so now we're gonna transition to the Civvy SITREP. So this is where we talk about economic business news in the civilian world and what we need to know about it. So Kyle shared me with this article from the Wall Street Journal about SPACs. So it's SPAC. Now, if you're sitting here, you're probably in the military, you're well familiar with acronyms, but this is probably an acronym that you don't know. So SPAC stands for Special Purpose Acquisition Company. So Kyle, can you kind of give us the lowdown, like what these things do?
Yeah, the SPACs are a relatively new entrant into the marketplace here, and specifically for the IPO marketplace, right? So not to like maybe go on too long of a tangent, but when a company IPOs, right, it has to go through like a variety of like, regulatory and legal hurdles to basically get itself listed as a public company. There's a big difference between a private company and a public company, right? A private company doesn't have to release financials. It doesn't have to do all these disclosures, right? It is a much tighter, ecosystem that it can operate in. And that gives there's pros and cons to that. It can give a lot more control over the people or over the founders. You don't have to release as much data for people to analyze. You don't have to answer to investors. I mean, you may have investors, right? Maybe through like a private placement or something, but or a debt offering. But like, you don't have to like. You're not going to release like quarterly like statements, right? And then have investor calls and have the SEC up your ass about stuff. And so even the process to go public, right, is like very long. It's like this kind of like structured process that can involve, and most of the time involves investment banks, right, and all this like these like kind of defined periods of like quiet periods and like road shows and like all this stuff they have to do and like what people can and can't say about the product, right? And you have to like put up like pro forma like financial statements, right?
It's a very formulaic process throughout the whole thing.
It is. It's very formulaic, right? So what SPACs do is SPACs allow to basically bypass most of that process. And the way they do it, right, is a SPAC essentially is a company going public that has absolutely no company behind it. There's no business behind it, right? There's no IP, there's no business model, there's like nothing. It's just like, hey, we're going to form a company, we're going to put together a management team, and we're going to go public, right? And we're going to raise money essentially, and what we're going to go do is then buy a company and merge with another company, right? And that company could be like a tech company, it could be like, I mean, it could be anything, right? But they buy this company, right? And because they've already raised all this money via the public markets, basically off the strength of the management team, they can then go and buy a company and skip all the regulatory stuff, essentially, right? Or at least to go public. But I mean, they'll have to then like do some of the regulatory stuff, like quarterly earnings and analyst calls and everything. But what it allows companies to do, right, is it allow these companies that are being acquired to basically go out and just say whatever the hell they want. They can, make outlandish claims. They can make wild claims, or be like, we're gonna, we're gonna go mine, unobtainium on Pluto or something, right? And if people will like buy into it, they'll buy into it, right? Like, because there's no regulatory hurdles, right? And there's also like other benefits as well, like people can like pull their money out. They could like, in a SPAC, right, and get their money back. It's almost kind of like a free lunch. It's a really interesting and unique way of raising capital and trying to avoid legal and regulatory hurdles. I wonder how long it'll remain that way, because I imagine the SEC at some point is going to say, hey, we know this is a way to get around our rules, and as such we're going to impose some sort of constraint around it. But when you hear the term SPAC, essentially that is what it's being used for.
Yeah. And in doing some research for this today, so I found out like SPACs have actually been around for a while. It's just in the last, I don't know, year or two, they've gotten hot. And we've seen some really big IPOs in the last last 2 or 3 years. And so I think they're starting to realize like this is just a way for us to raise a ton of money, which we can then use in an acquisition. And it's just a really fascinating business model, because they're raising all this money via the IPO. The money then just like sits. You don't even have to like have a plan of action for like, we're raising this money for the purpose of acquiring XYZ company. Like, you're just raising the money. It can sit in an account until you find a company to buy, and then you acquire it. It's there's no like defined purpose. It's really just like a shell corporation that is then, raising money for the purpose of acquiring another one. It's a really strange model.
When you'll hear like the term blank check, and like the way to like contextualize that is, I'm going to write this management team a blank check to go do whatever the hell they're going to do with it, right?
Yeah.
No business model. I just like assume they're going to make money.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're really just investing in like the management team at that point, and like not even, because there's no company, there's no value, there's no customers. Like, it is just I imagine just like a couple of dudes who are putting some money together, and they're gonna make a deal happen sooner or later.
Yeah, but I mean, but like, it's a way to think about that, right? Like, imagine like if Jeff Bezos and like Elon Musk like started like a SPAC, right? And they were like, we don't know what we're gonna do with it, and but it, like, people would invest in it.
Oh, 100%.
They'd be like, oh, these guys are gonna make us so much money, right? Like think of it like that, right?
That would just go straight STONKS, straight up to the top, man. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think it's a good way to kind of like contextualize why people are willing to buy SPAC stocks, or an IPO.
Yeah. Okay. So next we're going to get into unions in the tech world. All right. So I think it was maybe about.
I thought we were going to talk about the better EV batteries real quick.
Oh shoot, my bad, man. I skipped right over that. Yeah.
No worries.
No, you're right. You're right. Yeah. So what we're looking at right now. Sorry, Kyle. You want to go ahead and start us off on this one?
Yeah. So I found this, right, and I sent this over. So if I think most of the people who follow my page know that I recently got a Tesla, right? And for context, right, it was like the lowest end Model 3. It's not like I bought like a Tesla. I didn't spend like $70,000 on a Tesla. I bought the Toyota Camry, of Teslas, right? It's still really great and a lot of fun to drive.
Also, so hold on. I was talking to a mutual friend of ours, and he was saying, he's like, Mark, you need to get a Tesla. Then you and Kyle can record a podcast together while it's on auto drive, and you're both driving in the Tesla. I think that's just going to be like Tesla Inception, and Elon Musk.
Oh yeah.
If we can somehow figure that out.
The auto steer on it is very unnerving, because
that video you sent me was wild.
you really do not drive it when it's on the highway. I mean, it's almost kind of like monitoring like an aircraft in flight with like the autopilot and everything. But so it's what I've learned from this Tesla owning experience, right, is, you know, you have these like different tiers of chargers, and so the one, so like Tesla's like I have a Tesla charger installed at my house now, right, and it's kind of like this white, you know, curved thing. It looks like it came out of like that Wall-E movie. And you know, I plug it in my car and it charges my car up at like, you know, 30 or 40 miles of charge back per hour, which is great. And that is the preferred method of doing it. So like, you know, batteries, right? The batteries aren't meant to be charged like super quickly. And so on the road, you know, if you're traveling, you know, in between places, right? Tesla has this kind of network of superchargers set up, and you know, they're pretty cool. They're like this futuristic looking thing, and they're like behind like Hampton Inns, or, you know, sometimes in like the downtown areas of cities that you're passing through. Like when I go down to the beach, you know, I'll pass through like Definiak Springs and everything. Right. Just small town, but it's a major thoroughfare down to the Panhandle. And, you know, you can stop there. There's like 8 stalls and pull up your Tesla, charge it. And in like 20 or 30 minutes, like your Tesla is going to be charged, which is really quickly. But that's actually like, Tesla doesn't want you to do that every day because it's not good for the battery. And it's because of these dendrites that form. And this article is basically saying that in order for like, you know, like electric vehicles are really, you know, having a surge in popularity. You know, they're starting to hit, you know, if you're worked in venture capital, right? You know, we're starting to hit that hockey stick growth here. And they are, you know, this is going to be like a major problem to solve. And whoever kind of solves this fast charging problem where, you know, you can charge an electric vehicle, you know, in like 10 minutes, right? 10 or 15 minutes, and it doesn't damage the battery or destroy the battery, is going to make like oceans of money.
All of the money.
Yeah, like,
yeah, all of it. Just shoveling money into your bank account. I find battery technology in particular just fascinating because of the potential that it has, right? Like, just like you talked about, you know, the person who can figure out how to charge it super fast. Okay, now it becomes so much of like owning an electric vehicle, and like the decision point for someone of going from like a gas powered vehicle to an electric vehicle. You're gonna have lots of people who are, you know, super green, or just like, you know, want a cool Tesla, or whatever their reasons are for wanting to own an electrical vehicle. And then you have a lot of people who are like, yeah, you know, that sounds like a good idea, but I want to do it in a way that's not like any more inconvenient for me than is a gas powered vehicle. Mm-hmm. And part of that is the charging process. So if someone figures out a way to like charge it super fast, now it becomes like way easier for someone to cross that threshold of buying an electric vehicle. And now it's really going to hit that hockey stick that we talked about. And then like the ability to store power that's, you know, developed from the wind or solar or oceans or whatever it is just like great. We know how to generate the power, but it's storing it that prevents these technologies from becoming like much more widespread and widely adopted. And again, it's the people who can crack that nut are going to make all the money.
Yeah, I actually, so, you know, I'm building this house in Texas, and I think what I'm going to do is Tesla will install these solar panels on top of it, and they'll give you like this like power wall, which is this like big battery that kind of like ensures there's like a continuous cycle, you know, because like it'll take the electricity, store it there, right, when there's the cloud cover or disrupt. And like the more I learn about this, the more it kind of sounds like a great deal, right? Because you can like finance it from Tesla, and then so you finance it, right? And so say you're paying like Tesla like $200 a month, right, for these solar panels and this power wall. But you're connected to the grid, and because you're not taking energy from the grid, you're now pumping energy back out into the grid with excess energy. And so the electric company actually gives you a credit, right? So it almost like nets out. Like I was like kind of like doing the math here. And so like, you know, you pumping money back out to the grid like basically pays for the solar panels. And you may even get like a little money back, which is crazy to me. And it's like, and it's also going to charge my card too. So like now I'm not paying for gas. Now I'm not paying for electricity, you know, and stuff like that is really going to make this sort of like green tech is really going to, you know, make it economically feasible, right? Because then there'll be incentives for people to do it.
Right.
But, you know, I think we're kind of wrap up on this before we jump. I'm looking at this article and it says, and they're talking about this company QuantumScape, and it says the quantum, which is talking about fast battery charging, and it said the QuantumScape startup was founded in 2010 and went public in late November after it completed a merger with the SPAC. So, you know,
just tying it all in.
It's I was just tied. I just noticed
yeah.
that, but it makes sense.
And hey, as a former infantryman, if someone can figure out how to cut down on all the fucking batteries we had to carry, then I would be, years and generations of infantrymen would be appreciative of you, because batteries get really old to carry all the time. All right, let's move to the next one. So sorry, this is the one I tried to jump ahead to. So about unions in the tech world. So I think it was a week or two ago, a group of 200 employees at Google started to form a union. And so this is the first time that a union has been formed in big tech. And then additionally, there is a group of employees at an Amazon warehouse in Alabama that is right now in the process of voting to potentially unionize. So I kind of want to get your thoughts on this, Kyle, of like, what is this going to be something like, do you think we're going to see this more widespread across big tech, or is it just kind of like isolated events?
Personally, I think the labor movement in the United States is on life support. All these right to work laws, which have kind of come into the space or have come into an existence over the past 20 years, have really crippled unions, right? And if you're in the military, right, like let me kind of explain what this means, right? So right to work, when you hear right to work, what it essentially means is it's a two-way street, which is any company can hire you for like almost any reason, right? And they can also fire you for almost any reason. And you can join a company for almost any reason, given they want to hire you, and you don't have to join a union and pay dues into it, right? And you can leave a company for any reason, saying like, hey, I'm done with this. I want to go work somewhere else. And, subject to whatever contractual terms or in the employment agreement between you and your employer. And it didn't used to be like that, right? Like if you wanted to go work at like a steel mill, for example, you had to join the union. You had to join the union, and you had to pay dues to the union. You essentially had to say if I'm going to work here, I have to pay taxes to this organization, and they will, and in order to, because there's like a union agreement, and unions do still exist, right? When I worked at my last firm, doing M&A work, we dealt with them fairly often, considering I was in the industrial products group. And it's really interesting to see this kind of like make its way into the tech world here, because I'm not that sure if it's going to succeed, right? The tech world is highly competitive. It's a highly a frictionless labor market, which because of the right to work, right? Because people bounce between jobs all the time in the tech world, right? And so if you start to put in unions, right, like it'll reduce the liquidity in the human labor capital market. But there's also like another factor to consider here as well, which is unions are probably going to be more in when I say the lower end, right, like the less skilled end of the tech world, right? Like this article mentions distribution centers. And as e-commerce continues to expand here, right, it's only gone further in the pandemic, right? Like all these companies like Amazon, Target, Walmart, they're buying up these old properties everywhere, like malls that have nobody's using anymore. And turning them to distribution centers and hiring people. And so, you could see a resurgence of labor in the United States, because not every state has the same right to work laws. And so it'll be really interesting to see. And that'll affect, how competitive some states are versus how not competitive some states are. But there's also bargaining power on the other side, because people are still going to want to buy stuff, right? Like, say if like, hey, like here it says Bessemer, Alabama, which is where this story is at. People are still going to want to buy, stuff off online. That's just like the consumer trend, right? And so are companies going to have to basically allow unions now if they want to continue this trend? I don't know. We'll see. It'll be interesting to see how this all kind of plays out. But it could be a new start of labor.
I think these two things, like the way I'm reading them both, they're independent events. So I look at like the Amazon one, for example. Amazon has had a history of problems, in particular with their warehouses. Like they're known for long hours. They're known for hard work and like you just like go all day. They're known for very high demands. They're known for, you know, maintaining all the metrics and everything. Like they're a very data driven organization. And so like when you're on the floor, that means just like constantly going and doing everything. And you kind of couple that with like, they're not known for spectacular pay or anything. And so I think like this is just kind of the first instance we're seeing of some people just being fed up with it, and being like, we need to do something because, you know, we know that people are going to continue to buy from Amazon because it's just so easy. And so we as the workers need to figure out a solution so that, you know, we can figure out what's going to be best for us.
Yeah.
And then my kind of take on the Google thing is it's a lot more politically motivated. Like you've seen a lot of people from Google who've had problems with, you know, their work with the DoD. I think it was Project Maven or something, having to do with artificial intelligence. And, you know, you've had some problems there with, you know, inclusion of certain groups and everything. And so I think this one's a lot more just like motivated of the employees feel that they want to have a voice that's representative of the employees versus, you know, Google, the corporation, or Alphabet Corporation.
Yeah. You know, labor and unions, right? It's always kind of like politically charged because it depends on what you kind of view as like your philosophy on how labor should be handled, right? And like the term I always try to use is like liquidity in the human capital marketplace, right? And as an example, you know, and then we'll wrap this up, moving to the next thing. As an example, you know, when I was in my last unit, before I came off active duty, I was like done. I was like, okay, like I'm ready to leave. You know, the units kind of got me in this like position. Yeah, I think I was like the battalion S1, and I think I was the battalion S1. Oh no, I was. And then like when I dropped my refrad or my UQR, and it was like the last 6 months, like, okay, you're not going to do anything. It's like, what was the point of having me on there? Yeah. You know, like it's just like a waste of the taxpayers' money. Right. And I was ready to go do something else. You know. And like what that prevented was it prevented somebody who wanted the job, right, to come in and do something, right? And so, you know, nobody wants to get fired. Nobody wants to do any, you know, we always want to protect people's jobs and livelihood. But, you know, there's costs to like to putting up barriers to getting rid of somebody or not letting somebody leave or anything. And so I think it's something people should consider, right? It's all, you should always try to evaluate in both the pros and the cons. You know, unions can protect skilled labor and they can make people better, right? And they can provide good paying jobs. But, you know, there's also problems with unions too. There can be political corruption. You know, people have to pay dues to them who maybe don't want to pay dues to them. It can create an environment where it discourages growth in the company and innovation, which, you know, can make it harder for a company to grow and hire even more people, right? So, you know, freedom isn't like a straight line, you know, between like government regulation and like no government regulation. Like there's a curve, right? And we're always kind of like trying to find like where in that curve we as society are comfortable with the trade-offs, right? And I wish people would try to evaluate it like that instead of just going to like some polarized position.
Right. Okay, we're gonna move on past this one. So the next one up, we are talking about the FAA approved automated commercial drone flights. So, okay, you're the aviation nerd here. What's going on with this?
So, this is more about allowing drones to basically not transport people, right? Though people think that's going to happen at some point. I will be surprised. I'm not getting in one. This is more about allowing drones to go do stuff like, hey, we want to inspect railroad tracks, pipelines, industrial sites beyond the pilots, right? Beyond the sight line of, you know, pilots or spotters, right? Because like right now, if you want to do this, you know, you get like a drone license, you got to like go out and do it. I remember I was helping one of my buddies a couple years ago, like basically study for the drone pilot's license, right? And we were going over like a VFR chart, and like I was like explaining like on a section, like, okay, this is what this means, like Class D airspace.
I did not know that was a thing, but okay, right on.
Yeah, no, it totally is if you want to do it commercially.
Yeah.
And so this approval, right, will basically kind of like pave the way to where you could, you know, like set up a drone, you know, or like a fleet of them, be like, boom, go do your thing. And they go up and they go like, hey, we're going to go inspect these lines of like pipes or railroad tracks or telephone wires, you know, in this rural area. And then we will return to you. And they may go do it for like 30 miles. Like, you don't know, you know, and they're like totally like on their own. And that, you know, that's going to be, that's going to be a huge drop in price inputs, right, for companies like this, because now there's, scalability, right? You don't need to hire 30 drone operators, and instead you can hire like one, right? And he can so it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, as a former aviator, right, like there's got to be some sort of like deconfliction, for aviators, right? I don't know if it's like some sort of dynamic, like, flight paths or sectionals, or get put on like VFR sectionals or like moving maps or something, or I don't know, but like, you don't want to be like an actual pilot out there flying around and like see like a drone come like screaming by you. It's terrifying, so it'd be interesting to see how this all gets kind of deconflicted, because it will need to be deconflicted in order for it to be safe and feasible. And, like in large aircraft, right, you have what's called TCAS, right? And it's like transponder collision avoidance system. And I think all aircraft above like some certain weight, like 20,000 pounds or something, are required to have it. Maybe that might be the wrong number. Don't hold me to that. But basically, a system like that allows aircraft to know when there's another aircraft that's near them. It's kind of like in this bubble of protected airspace. And say if like ATC doesn't, tell them they're by, it'll give you like a resolution advisory so that the two can separate. And I wonder if something like this will occur with drones as well. So I don't know. Hey, there's probably commercialization opportunities there, if you're
100%
looking to make money.
Yeah. I mean, people are definitely making businesses off these things, and I think it's super cool. I mean, we think of the photography and wedding photography or buildings or whatever.
Yeah.
But there's also, I mean, like you said, like there's railroad inspections and building inspections. And I mean, there's, I've seen them used for like commercial construction purposes of just, versus me being the architect and having to climb all 80 stories to go see something. I just fly a drone up there and like check the work of whatever is going on. There's lots of really cool businesses that can come from drone technology.
Yeah. And this is good for society. We just, we need to figure out what's the safe way to do it, and what's the, because this will promote economic growth, and, it'll make stuff safer, and like, this is good. So it'll be interesting to see how it all kind of plays out. But hey, we're living in the future, man. It's crazy.
It is. All right. Moving on to the next story. So what this one is talking about, so the title is Big Banks Girded for Bad Loans, but They Never Came. So I think like what's happening, the big major banks were kind of expecting either, credit card defaults, mortgage defaults, loan defaults, whatever from COVID with, unemployment, people making less money, all these things. But there were some earning reports this past week from the big banks, and it really seems like that hasn't been happening. So Kyle, what are your thoughts on what's going on?
Yeah. So the banks, since this happened, right, there was like, it's going to be an economic catastrophe, right? We're going to go into another recession and everything. And largely that has not happened, right? Part of it's been, investor optimism. Part of it has been that we've had the technology to kind of sustain economic activity with this social distancing, right? And so banks set aside a lot, all this money, right, to basically like, look, we are preparing for the worst here. Like if we if these loans go bad, essentially people default, how are we going to write all this off? And we're going to, set aside this money to basically prepare for that. But now they're saying, hey, actually, we don't think that's going to happen. And this kind of plays into the whole stimulus check thing here. Is, people, they sent out that first round of like $1,200 stimulus checks, and then they approved the $600 ones. They're saying they want to do like $2,000 ones. And there's a lot of arguments, right, on from economists who say simply like, hey, the $2,000 checks are not a good idea, right? Like household savings are at an all-time high. The economy hasn't collapsed. There's still economic activity. And obviously there are people that are hurting. Don't want to take away from that, right? And like, so don't like, I'm not really like taking a stance, right? Like I'm more of like somebody like me, I don't need a stimulus check. Like I am okay. But for somebody who maybe, like lost their business or got put out of work, or, some sort of, like hourly worker, like there's probably like targeted relief that could be made, that could be put there. But this is, this just goes to show that there's real data behind that argument, because banks aren't seeing all these huge losses. They aren't seeing all these huge, bad loans coming through. So I think it's something to consider too, because, there's always so much rhetoric flying around about, you know, like, hey, Republicans are going to do this and Democrats are going to, you know, like, but like, what does the data say? You know, can we get baselined in what, like, you know, the data is saying? And I don't know. It'll just be interesting to see. You know, not all banks serve, you know, like lower income folks and everything, but it's just interesting to see that, hey, do we need to be sending out $2,000 stimulus checks to everybody? The data right here says we don't. So
Right. And the data usually shows that, like, when you send people, incremental consumer spending usually only corresponds with a like actual increase in real income. So like a one-time check of $2,000 isn't then going to have someone go spend that $2,000 immediately. You know, they save it, or they spend it on something that's not necessarily like going directly to the economy. They're helping a friend out or a family member out, or whatever it is. It's not necessarily like that money is going right back into the economy. Like, that's not how it's happening. Yeah. And I think,
oh, go ahead, Mark.
no, I was just saying, I think it's kind of, well, you go first, because my point's going to be a little bit longer.
Yeah, you know, it's, you know, everything I've read and heard of that, basically the economy is in hibernation, and there's certainly been a hollowing out of businesses at the lower end of the economic scale, primarily among like retail and restaurants. But those will come back. Like, when the economy opens and people have confidence they can go somewhere and not get sick, these will come back, because there will be demand. Now they'll come back in a different form,
right?
You know, because society has now changed a little bit, you know, but they will come back, right? You know, so there's always that's where this sort of like economic optimism is. Like, people are still going to need to eat, people are still going to need to shop. You know, there's stuff is going to come back. Just it'll be a little different.
Okay. You know, I had a point, but we're going to skip it for now, because it was a little bit too tangential. All right. So, last thing we want to talk about. So, this is a story from, I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and Elon Musk was decrying what he calls the MBAization, I think it's how I would pronounce it, of America. Basically saying that we have too many MBAs, too many people are going to get MBAs, and you know, MBAs who are MBA graduates who are populating the ranks of corporate America are stifling the economy and are preventing us from driving innovation. So what were your thoughts on this, Kyle?
You know, I read this article and immediately
I felt personally attacked.
No, I think there's, you know, let's baseline off something. Elon Musk is one of the most is one of the richest people in the world, and I'm not, right? So like I say, let's just perspective and kind of like take everything with a grain of salt. He has a point, but you know what his point is, right? When he says the MBAization of America, what he's not, I think what he's talking about is less like MBA graduates are ruining everything, and more of, you know, when you make a product, right? Like too many times, you know, working in the corporate world, right? You end up seeing this. You will see executives really focused on briefings and like PowerPoints and like financial metrics, right? And like, what is the stock price doing? And they should focus on that because it's important. But should CEOs really be focusing on that, or should they be focusing on making their product as good as possible, right?
Right.
And that is at the core of the argument of what Elon is making here. Elon is fanatical about focusing on producing a good product. That Tesla that's sitting out in my driveway, that thing is really well designed. Like, yeah. I couldn't believe it. I was like, damn, this is like if Apple, this is better than even what I thought Apple could have made. You know, if I thought about an electric car. And he focuses intensely on the design, and he's trying to get negative feedback and trying to get feedback about like, how can I make my product better, right? And that's part of like this agile design thinking of like always like working with end users to kind of develop products that are really attuned and meeting their needs, as opposed to designing stuff that, you know, you did like a market research study and like there was like, oh, we did a regression and there's like these, you know, coefficients that we think, you know, we should like focus on. And that I think is kind of the point he's making, right? As opposed to saying like, if you go into an MBA program, you're not going to learn anything valuable. The only thing you're going to learn how to do is like make PowerPoint slides. Because what you really learn in an MBA program is you learn about like the basic fundamentals of business, right? Like when I talk to Army officers, I'm like, look, imagine if they took your basic course, the captain's career course, and some of ILE, right? And they compressed it into a 2-year program, and they had you go do a competitive internship with some unit, right? And then you basically fought for a full-time role at another like really like elite unit, right? Like that is what an MBA is. An MBA is not going to turn you into Steve Jobs overnight.
Right.
It's not going to turn you into Tim Cook overnight. It's going to, you'll walk into an MBA program not knowing the difference between revenue, expenses, and profit. And by the time you leave, you will understand like the blocking and tackling of what goes into running a business. But that doesn't mean you'll actually be able to do it. Like it's more of just like getting your ticket punched, then go do it, right? You're like, hey, now you can go and begin to enter the leadership roles of corporate America, right? And when you enter those leadership roles of corporate America, you're going to do stuff like make slides. You're going to do stuff like calculate financial metrics. You're going to like work with executives. You're going to learn about like how businesses are actually run on the inside, right? And like part of like the argument like you see in this article is, oh, if you look at like the number of like CEOs that MBAs produce, like it isn't that many. But here's the thing, right? Like most CEOs or like entrepreneurs are like, there's like a different skill set than what an MBA would possess, right? MBAs are meant to help like run the company, right? And if you look at the ranks of corporate America, they are filled with MBAs, like from top to, well, not from top to bottom, but from like most of corporate management in America. And there's a reason for that. It's because they understand the intrinsic fundamentals of what's going on in business. I mean, understand might be a long word. They at least have like some like ability to like understand the kind of like ecosystem that's going on there. But like an entrepreneur or something is like, to me personally, that's a different skill set than MBA has.
Right. Right. I think like that's kind of the driving factor here is like Elon is, I mean, an exception. Saying he's an exceptional entrepreneur is an understatement. I mean, the guy has done a number of companies, all of which are just like bonkers, crazy good, and are just like totally far out in left field. And so like he brings an immensely different skill set. So it's like I see him say stuff like this, and I'm a huge fan of Elon. I think he's awesome. And I see on Instagram people love to like share his quote about like, you don't need to go to college or something. And I'm like, okay, first of all, he's not a normal human being. All right. There's something different.
No, he's not.
He's wired differently. Like there's something else going on in his brain that like
the rest
of us don't have.
He's like way far on the right of the bell curve. Right.
Like
he's an outlier.
I was listening to this podcast with a guy who works he's a former NASA astronaut. He works at SpaceX. And so he has a lot of interactions with Elon. And he was just talking about his ability to like, he can talk to, the materials engineer and then like the rocket scientist and then the software engineer, like all in the same room, and each one of them have like a different conversation that goes into like the weeds of their specialty. Like that is a unique person that can handle that. Yeah. Sorry. Like most of us just aren't that good. And like, I know that I can't do that. Like he's different for that capacity. Like he didn't need the formal education to do that because like he can just do it. And I think like, and then the other aspect, I think you're totally right with an MBA does not create an entrepreneur. It does not create someone who's there to drive innovation or something. Like you're looking for the people who are going to be running the business and are like know how to keep the company going. An MBA is not going to like, you're not going to come out and just know how to just create business from nowhere. And it's not just pouring out of your fingertips. Like that's not what the school is designed for. And he's a person who very much values like innovation and, crazy thinking and everything. And that's just there's a difference there between like what he values and like what the school offers.
Yeah. It's not like, it's like when I graduated West Point, it's like, just because you get a second lieutenant bar and a West Point degree doesn't mean you're Dick Winners, right?
Right.
You need to get experience. There's different capability levels that people have. There, people's paths are often determined by the opportunities that are, either they get through, skill, persistence, luck, or a combination of all three, right? And like the little kind of like dials is like that you have to like, move to like steer the ship in a company, right? Or all things that you need, you need to have people have an understanding of business fundamentals. This article also makes the argument, it's like, hey, like a rock star experience within the company, can be way more valuable than an MBA. That's 100% true. When I was doing consulting at my last firm, right, I would meet people all the time who didn't have MBAs or business education, and they were doing just fine out in the corporate world. But it's tough for companies to find labor like that. That is, like one of the reasons companies go to MBA programs is they know we're going to get in all likelihood, we're going to get like a certain standard of quality of person who has like these kind of like base skills.
It's a standardized product you can go to, right?
Yeah. And they know like, we have labor needs, right, in order to keep the company going or grow the company, right? And this is where we're going to go because this is the easiest way to do it. Because to actually go out and find people can be extremely difficult, especially when you're trying to find people like young MBAs, right? Like the kind of like average demo age or the average like MBA is like 27, has no kids, is not married, and will literally move anywhere.
Yeah.
Like they'll be
and work 70 hours a week and just be happy about it. Right.
Yeah. And be like, pay me $140,000, $150,000, work me 70 hours a week, and I'll move anywhere for you. That is so much different than what you're going to find out in the normal labor market.
Right.
Like, you try to like find somebody to fill a role like that, and they'll be like, I got kids, I got family, you can pay you like this or that, and it's like a huge pain in the ass to find somebody, then come work for your company. Right. So, I think it's just like a way to like keep that in context. Right. And I'll get people on like my Instagram page who just like, I don't know, be like, hey, MBAs suck. And like, how, like blah, blah, they don't know anything. And, like they don't, and it's like, guys, like you don't get it. Right. Or they're in a role where there's like no MBAs. Like I've had people in like tech companies being like, at Facebook, MBA doesn't mean anything, which is total bullshit because Facebook hires plenty of MBAs every year. Like, no, bro, just in like your business line or like your one role, MBAs don't mean anything. Right. But guess who actually runs the company? It's MBAs. Just like the, and it's just this like kind of like periscope where they think there's like, just because they have like one view, right? They think they like understand everything. And like the biggest thing I tell vets, right? You've got to get perspective. You've got to understand that just because somebody tells you something works at Facebook or Apple or some other company doesn't mean they're entirely right. Like go talk to other people. Like these are huge companies and they're complex, right? So it's just all about perspective. And and this is a cool article. Like I enjoy articles like this, but it's always good to keep perspective.
Yeah. Also,
and by the way, Tesla hires plenty of MBAs, by the way.
Right. Also, if you're listening to this, you're probably a vet. If you have the GI Bill, people, like go freaking use it. Okay. I mean, that was absolutely, a huge reason for me in particular. I was like getting out of the army. I was like, what the hell am I going to do with my hands now? And I was like, okay, well, I don't want to do this. Don't want to do that. MBA seems like a good option. By the way, I have a GI Bill. It's going to pay for it. So dope. All right. I want to make, sorry, Kyle, I didn't give you a heads up on this one, but I just want to make a quick shout out to a veteran nonprofit. So it's called Warrior Rising, and their goal is all about empowering veteran entrepreneurs. And I just had my intake call with them yesterday. I'm actually in the process of starting a company while I'm here at Darden. Little too early for me to say exactly what it is yet, but it's veteran focused. And so if you're out there, even if you just have an idea, whatever it is, give these folks a call. So go to warriorrising.org. Like, what do they offer? So one, they have some like online classes you can kind of take to get started and everything. And then they pair you up with a mentor who kind of, checks in with you, sees where you are in your process, guides you in certain directions to kind of help you build your business. And then when you're ready, they will pair you, they'll try and match you with, potential investors and fundraising opportunities to actually turn your business into a real reality. So if you're there tossing around an idea, check out warriorrising.org. There's a number of other great organizations out there, but we're just going to focus on that one for right now.
Yeah, no, this is really cool. I'm looking at the website. That's great. I mean, veterans that they can do so many great things as founders and entrepreneurs. They just need some mentorship and advice. Also check out the Veterans Biz Battle run by the Rice MBA program. I have a buddy of mine who's doing that. That is a great spot to like get mentorship advice and also money for your company. So would highly encourage that as well. And I think the applications are due by February 4th or something. So you can just Google it, Veterans Biz Battle, but a lot of opportunities out there.
Yeah. I actually just spoke with a venture capitalist yesterday, and his fund does exclusively military entrepreneurs. So that it's all high growth tech startups in the that are run by veterans.
And what would be the name of this what's the name of this firm?
Let me hold on. Somebody give me 1 second real quick. I think it's TFX Capital. No, TFX Capital. They're based out of Charlotte.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, I'll be having him on the podcast for an interview in a couple of weeks. And so the show probably won't publish for another like 2 months or so, but just keep an eye out for it.
Yeah. Another VC firm that also focuses on veterans is Moonshot Capital as well.
Yeah.
The resources are out there, people. You just have to be willing to go talk to them.
Absolutely. All right. Well, this wraps up the weekly sit rep, folks. Before we officially close the show, Kyle, you got any last thoughts or words?
Hell of a way to start 2021. No, I'm just flabbergasted by everything, but nothing else from me. And I appreciate everybody who listens to this. So
yeah. Hey, just the last words. So if you like what we're doing on the show here, leave us a review on whatever podcast app that you use. Subscribe to the show and get it delivered to you. So it's the Veteran Semi-Professional Podcast. And then additionally, if you have anything that you want Kyle and us to explore, to talk about, whatever, just shoot us a note, DM us on Instagram, send us an email, whatever, carrier pigeon, smoke signal, however you can get a message to us. And then we can explore something on the show. So thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next week. Take it easy.
Yep.